So
Thank
welcome
you.
everybody to the second hour of Mind Shifters Radio, and today is Monday, September the 15th, 2025. Gosh, the month is half gone. What's happening here? Time just flies. So anyway, we'll get Michael on here in just a second. I hope everybody's doing well and had a great weekend. And we had a really good codependence class last night. So welcome Sally and Terry and Joe and Susan B. and Andrea. And we're glad that you all are with us. Michael had gone over, there's one chapter of my book that I tell my story and the false concepts that I took on about myself. And then later in the book, the whole chapter is worksheets on what I said in that other chapter. And so it's going through and so I had Michael go through it and make sure that I was like staying on topic, that I had the right goal. And so he gave that back to me yesterday, but we were pretty busy. And so I was working on that this morning and getting to see what other worksheets I still need to do. Peter, good to see you from Sweden. Hope you're doing well.
Cool. Thank you, dear heart. And welcome, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well. Welcome, Peter. Glad to see you here. Sally, Susan, Terry. Delighted. And who's got something on their minds? Let's open the lines up to start off and see where the conversation goes. I have a thought of something to get into, but I'd rather see what everybody else has got on their minds. So if you've got a thought, push that mute button. And Peter, seeing as how you're joining us, go for it. Andrea.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, I know that I had talked to you a bit on the weekend about how much that video had shifted for me. My own mind matrix, or like how you say the brain cells on
Right.
relationships. And like I always think about it as breaking out of my own mind matrix. And what I'm noticing is this really neat pattern where these big realizations come in and there's so
Right.
much clarity. For a couple of days, it was like the wounding would come up and then I would be able to actually see the space between the perception
Right.
and I want to say actuality, but I don't think that's exactly that, but it's like a space where what I think is true out of wounding, I can see that it isn't true. And then it feels a little more neutral, but not exactly like a full space of love.
Not finished with it yet, but still,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like, and this I rarely see until people do quantum still point. It sounds like you've broken your addiction to the carbon-based memory trauma, and that's a powerful place to be.
Well, and so what I'm finding today, and thank you, I'm glad to hear that. That feels reassuring. Like all this guidance is just so, um, it's like miraculous in a way of like miracles are happening, is what I mean. But then the pain that comes, it's that feeling of like everything I thought is dying. And
Yay.
it is exciting, but it's also like has this excruciating feeling to it. But I'm willing to feel it because for the first time, it feels like I'm not actually going to drown in it, that it's safe to feel it and I have support. Um, but it's also like a painful, it feels like death,
It
right?
is a death.
Yeah.
There you go back to Yeshua, and he says, in order for you to live, being, you, non-being self, have to die. And so the ego self, the self that's based in fear and pain and hostility and trauma, is starting to fall apart, and that can be experienced as a very real death. In fact, it can be quite traumatic if one doesn't have the tools to understand it and work through it.
Yeah, and I can see how in the past I didn't allow myself to go there because it felt like it was going to break me, and I didn't know how to support myself through it or get through it. And so it's interesting because I had this clarity. It was so deep for a couple of hours, and I could see how everything that I was hurting about over my past relationship, which has been a replica, that I could see this connection where there was like no separation for about a couple of hours. And it was like, I could see how my past partner was actually, I seen him like standing behind the mirror, but all that was up, it has nothing to do with him. It was actually just this mirror showing me, the parts of me that I was avoiding or couldn't see because it was in my unconscious. And it was like a couple of hours of just like, I just stayed with it. And it was like this clarity of just seeing me and the power person dynamics, and how I do it to myself. And then how like even my anger around the narcissistic dynamics just
Oh,
fell
you used to do
away.
it to yourself?
No, I still do it to myself.
I was just a vote.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and the worksheets are helping me understand that, because at first when I read the punishment, I was like, because with my past partner, I was like, whoa, what is going on here? Like, you live about punishing and weaponizing, and like, what is going on here? But now that I've been doing the worksheets, it's bringing this awareness that my main punishment to myself is criticism and making me wrong and hiding. And I didn't recognize that as punishment. I thought of it as self growth and protection.
Hmm.
And now it's just coming really clear. And just to share like the the beautiful clarity where in those couple of hours there was no separation and there was no
Nice.
other, and it was really beautiful. And then now it seems like the pain and the integration and these waves just keep hitting of just like
Next layer.
really facing myself.
There's actually a cute post on YouTube, came across my feed a couple of weeks ago. And Jim Carrey is very into doing his work and awakening. And he's addressing an audience, a group, and his timing, his comedic performance is pretty amazing. And he talks about this opening that he had, this state is like, oh my God. And then he, dials the energy down and looks at the audience and says, yeah, and since then I've been trying to get back to it. He just delivers it in such a way. And, those states come and visit us to give us the gift of clarity. And I think also to remind us that notice the true being that shows up in that space has never been touched by anything that's happened to you.
Yeah.
It's always shiny. It's always brand new. It's just a matter of letting it in, and that that state of being is what was given to us with our first breath. It is the state of salvation. It is the state of grace. And it's in a different frequency realm than anything that happens in this world.
Mm.
So it's never touched by it. It's just a matter of letting it in. And then having let it in, being able to maintain it.
Yeah. Yeah, the maintain it thing is something I even thought the other day. I'm like, maybe I need to get a tattoo says active presence of love because I keep forgetting.
Put it on the inside of your palm so you can sneak a look at it when
Right.
when other people are around. That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for listening.
You know, there's a. I've mentioned this a few times recently. There's a an interesting statement that was made by. Oh no, his name's gone. Um, Signing the Declaration of Independence, Franklin comes out of the signing of it, and a woman asks him the question, well, what do we have? Do we have a republic? Or I forget exactly how her question went, but his answer was, you have your republic if you can keep it. We each have a human life. We come into this world, and the pressures and the brainwashing of the world push down our throats, sadly, oftentimes in churches, the insanity of the non-being mind and the non-being world. And the first order of business is, once you realize that, discover your human life. Now, can you keep it? What does it take? And to me, Yeshua just said, here's a whole basket of tools. Here's how you do it. And he clearly says the result of it for him is, yeah, I'm in this world. Here I am. Look, I'm here with you, but I'm not of it. Its sources, this world source is nothing for me because I've forgiven in me that which resonates in the world. So I show up in the world as a human being. That's what I've come to demonstrate for you, is what it is to come through this device called a body-mind unit as a human. So joining you and keeping it.
Thank you.
And of course, as we practice supporting each other and doing it, we get the gifts. Awesome. Breathing with you. Anyone else have a thought to share? I see Peter's with us from Sweden. Anything to share with us today, Peter?
He wrote in the chat room that he couldn't talk.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, just extending
He's
love in your
listening.
direction all the way over there to Sweden. Okay, well, I'm going to do something a little different today. I'm going to address, it sounds like it's going to sound perhaps like I'm addressing a political issue, but this show is non-political. I'm not interested in politics. I have a personal, perspective, but that's my personal perspective. It's not part of this show. But this appears in the world as politics. But what I want to point out is the divergence of the Aramaic understanding of life that Yeshua offered and what, when the Greeks took it over, they brainwashed us into. And much as what just Andrea just shared is that as you've broken down significant pieces of this non-being self, and what it takes is processing through the mind energy of those non-being dynamics, then everything shifts, everything changes. And I'm going to bring this up in the way that I'm going to bring it up to point out how deeply embedded in our culture. And if you were brought up in churchianity, and I don't care which part of churchianity you were brought up in, if it was the churchianity influenced and brought about through the Greeks, then you live in one world. And what I want to demonstrate is the Aramaic alternative to that. So there was a pretty horrific event that happened a few days ago A young man was shot at a school. It's interesting. It's first school shooting in many cases that certain groups of people have paid any attention to. However, this young man, whatever his politics were, whatever his behaviors were, whatever his activities were, and some of them induced some pretty heavy trauma for a lot of people. I do not believe that anybody, especially a young father, a couple of kids, and I understand that his wife may be pregnant. Nobody deserves that. I mean, it's just insane for this culture to be going there. But it's a product of the hostility and fear that we've been brainwashed, in particular, in many cases, by churchianity. So what I want to do, someone posted on my page a letter that was written by a minister. And this Greek perspective locks people into a whole mindset that my offering is, it's so pervasive in this culture, it needs to be addressed by more and more people in order for us to even consider getting free of it. And because of the depth, and I'm going to read his whole letter, it's fairly long, but you'll see weave through it how the brain cells have been built in people to formulate their perceptual constructs in a certain way. And that certain way is one that is interpreted through and shows up with a root based in fear and conflict and pain. You know, the letter frames this horrific event in terms of martyrdom, battle, offense, war, conflict, enemies, where if you go to the Aramaic, a whole different set of brain cells is called into play. And what we want to do is bring the original Aramaic foundation back into awareness at every moment where we might be tempted to fall into a construct in our own minds that is based in this Greek foundation. So the Aramaic takes one back to responsibility, to inner cleansing, to the removal of blame and forgiveness. So this letter, and I'm just going to read through it with the idea of just listen to the kind of brain cells it takes to write and to live from this space. The opening, or the title of it, is called "The Cross Still Offends." Like as though people who are in hostility and fear, it's Jesus' fault. So I'm not going to mention the minister that wrote it, but the title, "The Cross Still Offends." The bullet tore the air in half. A folding chair rattled. A Bible dropped. A young man slumped sideways beneath a white event tent, eyes wide with the weight of eternity. It was supposed to be a conversation, a prove me wrong segment. But this time, rebuttal came not with words, but a rifle. He didn't get to finish his sentence. I got the news just before prayer meeting. I contemplated his death as I prepared to lead the saints in prayer. But I didn't feel like praying, not tonight. My hands were still, my mouth was ready, my soul was pacing, angry, grieving, tempted. tempted to grow quiet, tempted to sit this one out, tempted to wonder if any of this faith, boldness, public gospel witness is still worth it. Because hatred in this country isn't simmering anymore, it's boiling. Europe is trembling. Israel is burning. Rockets lit the sky over Gaza again. And now here on American soil, the blood of a Christian apologist paints the pavement of a university quad. What do you do with that? Here's a question I want to answer that he asks. What do you do with that? He's a Christian minister. Listen to his solution. What do you say when courage gets gunned down in daylight? He was no perfect man, none of us are. But he had backbone where most of us don't anymore. He was a believer, unashamed, unafraid. He understood that real conversations only happen when truth is welcome at the table. And the truth he carried most was Christ. I'll edit that and put in the words, a Greek Christ. He brought the gospel, again, I'll put in brackets, a Greek gospel, into the public space on purpose. Because the gospel isn't supposed to stay in church basements and private Bible studies. It's meant to confront. It's supposed to offend. Interesting. The Bible's supposed to offend. Again, this is a Greek theology. It was not made for safety. The word became flesh and they nailed him to a tree. So of course they came for Charlie. Of course they reached for a gun. This is what evil does when it runs out of arguments. It doesn't reason. It kills. That's the part that catches in my throat. Not just the sadness, but the strategy of hell behind it. The enemy wants us afraid. He wants us to see what happened to Charlie and backpedal. He wants the rest of us to whisper, to soften the message, to believe the lie that faith should stay private. But Christ never whispered. He preached in temples, on hillsides, in courtrooms, and at dinner tables. When they told him to be quiet, he picked up his cross. Not a symbolic one, a real one, heavy, bloody, splintered. When Jesus said, "Follow me," he didn't hand out maps, he handed out crosses. That's what I remembered tonight. I sat in our prayer space surrounded by saints who had brought prayer lists and worn Bibles, and I realized I didn't want to lead them in mourning. I wanted to lead them into battle. Greek theology, not with banners or fists, but with open Bibles and tear-stained prayers. The kind of war that kneels in gravel beside the wounded, hands them living water, and refuses to leave. The kind that speaks both mercy and judgment without flinching. Judge not, lest you be judged. My edit. The kind Charlie died for. The world is not a friend to grace, but grace isn't fragile. Who shall separate us from this love of Christ? Paul didn't leave that question unanswered. Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? He piles up every fear you carry and then sets them on the fire. No, in all these things, we're more than conquerors. That means bullets don't win. Slander doesn't win. Prison bars don't win. Death doesn't win. You can lose everything in this world and still walk into glory with your head lifted high because the love of God in Christ isn't suspended by headlines or gunfire. There are two worlds unfolding right now, one you see and the one you don't. One is filled with chaos, the other filled with crown. Again, my edit, one is Greek, the other is Aramaic. I believe that when Charlie's body slumped on the concrete, his soul stood upright in heaven, not limping, not silenced, not stunned, but crowned. He didn't fall, he crossed. The great cloud of witness gained another voice, and I wonder if Stephen met him there, the first martyr, the man who got stoned for preaching what the crowd didn't want to hear, the man who in his final breath saw the heavens open. The only time in all of Scripture we see Yeshua standing at the right hand of God. rising to receive one of his own. I like to believe he stood again. Are you afraid? Do you feel the tremble in your spirit? Do you wonder if it's still worth it to speak boldly, to carry your Bible, to preach the gospel in a world that doesn't just disagree, but wants you gone? You're not alone. You're not weak for feeling that. But you're called to something stronger than silence. Don't let fear become your theology. The cost is high. But the reward is Christ. And he's not a concept, he's a king. Heaven is not empty. It is filled with scarred saints who refuse to bow to fear. Men who were stoned, women who were burned, children who sang while the flames climbed. And every last one of them arrived. There's no difficulty that can cancel the promise of the Creator. There is no persecution that can derail your destination. There is no sniper's bullet that can separate the soul from Christ. Your life is not measured by how long you live on earth, but how much of it was spent pointing to heaven. Paul said, I've fought the good fight. I've kept the faith. Then he looked toward the reward, not a monument, not a mention in history books, but a crown. He handed to him by the one with nail marks in his hands. So let me say this clearly. We do not mourn like the world mourns. We do not write eulogies dripping with sentiment. We sing songs of resurrection. We carry the banner of a king that does not tremble. He did not die for nothing. He died carrying the same message that you and I must now carry forward. The cross stands tall, but the tomb is empty. The gospel has not lost 1 ounce of power, so pick up your cross, wipe your eyes, and keep going. The crown is worth it. The king is coming. And there's still time to speak, even if they shoot. Lord, give us the courage. If not the safety, give us joy. For we carry not just the message, but the marks, and you're worth every bruise. So my invitation is just to look at the worldview, the deeply embedded, emotionalized, trauma-based worldview that a being that is made in the image and likeness of love, that comes from love, is supposed to hold and believe in. That's a whole, like you look at all the different references, which is why I read the whole thing, all the different references and all the brain cells that fire up, boy, there's a whole world view there. And if you look to the Greek gods who slaughtered their own children, raped their own mothers, and killed and maimed anybody they chose to, you see that worldview comes from a source. And it's not the source that you and I come from. So this whole pastor's letter frames this horrific event in terms of martyrdom, again, battle, offense. And if we bring the Aramaic Yeshua into it, we see that there's a clash of visions here. You know, he literally describes his death as a war cry. Rather than a call for compassion and being and love, it's a war cry. Let's start to divide, the sheep from the goats here. That's the mindset of a worldview that probably every one of us have been somewhat brainwashed in, some more deeply than others. Now, he doesn't make it a war cry with weapons, but he talks about a faith that does not whisper. And what do his words paint? But a picture of enemies, crosses, crowns, framed with the language of battle. He calls for the courage to pick up your cross. Yeshua had a whole different offering than what a cross would be my take. And he speaks of this pick up your cross in the sense of confrontation, commit offense. And that's basically what Paul's story was, and the martyrs of the early church. If we listen to Yeshua, I suspect if he'd written that letter, he'd have written a letter about directing our energy inward. Instead of blaming the others and having this list of shooters, enemies, sinners, Yeshua would say, what kind of energy, what kind of pain, what kind of anger do you feel? And to recognize that that is not caused by what just happened out there in the world. Actually, what just happened out there in the world is a product of the collective gathering of those trauma energies. The pain that the individual feels, if there is pain to be felt, comes from the unresolved dynamics within oneself, Yeshua would say. The cross that Yeshua actually instructed us to carry, he says, he didn't say take up my cross. He doesn't say take up this piece of wood. He says take up your cross. What is your cross? So he instructed us to carry this cross of facing, owning, and releasing our own pain, our rage, our generational trauma through forgiveness, freeing ourselves of that whole Greek mindset, that whole theology that has so sickened the world for so long. He's saying, let go of this blame game. Do the literal inner work of transforming the energies that keep you separated from love, and then bring that self forward to the atrocities of the world. In John 6:60 to 65, there's a story that's told. And Yeshua they basically ask him the question, what's most important? What do we have to do here? And he gives them an Aramaic idiom. He says, eat my body and drink my blood. And the larger number of the disciples that were there said, in response to that, too hard a saying, who can hear it? Now, today, people would interpret that, eat my body and drink my blood, as taking communion. What's so tough about that? And some people say, oh, no, they were thinking about, you were going to go over and actually take a bite of his leg. No. Eat my body and drink my blood in Aramaic is an idiom for you're going to have to do the work that I have prescribed for you. And they said, too hard a saying. You mean I have to go in and face my rage, my unresolved family history of trauma around war and people being shot? I have to face and heal the hatred, the fear, the grief, the sadness, the blame, the relationship pain in me? I have to face those generational patterns. I have to face those cultural patterns in me. Too hard a saying. That's the refusal that I see in this pastor's letter. Oh yeah, well, we're not. He didn't say anything about go inside yourself and deal with what's going on inside of you. He's like, yeah, let's get it out and go to war. Let's go sock it to them. And that refusal from 2,000 years ago continues today. People, want the name, the drama, the enemy narrative, but not the discipline of turning inward and removing the hostility, the fear, the sadness, the grief, the rage, and then standing in and as a human being. This pastor calls Kirk a saint, silenced by the world's hatred. Yeshua in Luke 6:46 says, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? Yes, he says, many will come calling my name, and I'll say, I didn't know you. The test of discipleship with Yeshua is not a public battle It's not the willingness to go kill somebody. In fact, in Aramaic, the word neighbor means anybody that you think about. So if you think about those people you want to make war on, they're your neighbors, and Yeshua had a requirement. He's got a pretty high standard. What were you required to do? To stand connected to Rahma, to keep that filter, that gateway in your own mind open so that you could function as conscious, active, present love. So that you had the ability to face and remove the inner hostility so that you could embody love, literally embody love, even toward the so-called enemy. And of course, you listen to the worldview that's reflected through that letter that I just read. Oh yeah, they want us afraid. They want they. What do I bring to that is what Yeshua would ask them. So the movement from blame to forgiveness is the request that this work makes of us. Anger is not an emotion caused by what's going on outside of us, but it's a drug the mind generates to numb deeper pain. Blame has pretty much become humanity's universal religion. Carl Jung speaks of the avoidance of facing one's own soul, that people will do anything in order to avoid facing their own soul. And recognize in this context that Yeshua's teaching on forgiveness is not to let others off the hook, but dissolving the internal energies that keep us trapped in cycles of pain and violence. This is the core pivot, moving from condemnation and martyrdom narratives to literal inner transformation. Instead of perpetuating fear, what forgiveness does is it collapses the fear-based constructs of the mind, the carbon-based memory, the mind of man, and cleanses and restores physiology to a space where it can incarnate and hold our true created being, which is love. You know, Yeshua made a statement at one point, a fountain cannot bring forth sweet water and bitter. Do you have enemies? Do you want to do harm to them? Then your water is bitter. You can't do sweetness and hold that mindset. You can't have that as an underlying filter or energy and bring forward the purity of your created human essence. So his call is for everyone. The true call of the Aramaic Yeshua is for everyone to own and forgive from their hearts. In the Aramaic language, the word heart would be the equivalent of our understanding today of the unconscious, to go into our own unconscious and remove that which we've projected into our brain's image of others. And you listen to that letter and it's all about the projection on what everybody else did. Now, does that mean that what was done is okay? Not in any way, shape, or form. But can I bring the transforming presence of active love through me in the face of an atrocity, and therefore bring transformation to the atrocity? Or do I do battle cries and go and reinforce the whole battle idea and keep the world's game going? Again, Yeshua said, I'm in this world, but I'm not of it. Our objective, our created essence, our underlying purpose as human beings, I would offer, is to show up in the world as fountains of healing rather than transmitters of bitterness ready to fight at the drop of a hat. So Yeshua offers a call to action to do your work. What happens to most? Too hard a saying. Who can hear it? And they left. And, if you go back and you read that whole passage, the energy was in such a disturbed state. They even turned to Peter. These disciples are leaving. They don't give us exact numbers, but the understanding is it's a larger part of the group that leaves and never comes back. But there was such a disturbance in the field, such a disturbance in the space. He actually turned to Peter. He said, Peter, are you guys going to leave too? So the invitation is to literally breathe, to literally look inside of ourselves, to literally remove the hostility and fear-based dynamics that never belonged inside of a human being. This isn't theology. This is a call for real, true, at depth transformation. And, the contrast. In one hand is bitterness, and yes, but we'll fight on. In the other hand is healing, blame versus responsibility, offense versus the presence of love, enemies versus brothers and sisters, neighbors, martyrs versus forgiveness and the restoration of being. So do we shift, in this of course is an example, but it doesn't matter. This example could live in where one works, where one has their family, where one goes to church. The vision is to shift the conversation from the drama of outward enemies to the inner work, and that's the only thing that ultimately heals the world. When we individually and collectively show up as active present love, it's a tough call. You listen to Yeshua, and the only place he even comes close to blame is those who beat people into submission with this theology of trauma. To those he says, your father is a liar. Is the father of liars. But to the ones that those who were giving them that theology would call sinners, what did he do? He went and sat with them and supported them in healing. His words weren't about blame and war. Yes, he did point out there are going to be some healing crises, there's going to be some trauma come up. But the invitation is to literally become the living embodiment of love by remove everything that's in us that's unlike love. And I invite you to join me in the vision that that's something that is possible and can literally capture the world's imagination. Rather than feeding fear, what we want to do is open the door out of fear that has captured the world. Rather than glorifying violence, dissolves the very energies that create violence. So my offering is that's where we want to go with this, and it seemed to me like this was a good example of, in the real sense of contrasting the way that Greek so-called theology, Greek so-called translations, there are no Greek, I would offer, translations of the words of Yeshua. To translate something means to take the understanding, the meaning behind what's firing in the brain cells of the individual speaking the words, and bring that accurately into another language using words that fire the same brain cells. If you look at virtually every key word in Aramaic, the Greek interpretation is exactly opposite. Forgiveness has become pardon. Love has become sexual athletics. And we could just go on and on and on and on down through the list. The objective here is to really, truly, individually and collectively create a support system for a community that truly lives as a community of love, processing out everything unlike our original created state. And so I hope that's been a good and useful example. It was one that, as I contemplated it, I found exciting to delineate, and I'd love your thoughts, your opinions. We've got about 12 minutes, so anyone, Sally, go for it.
Wow. Wow. I have no idea what I'm going to say, but I would like to say thank you for sharing that. I would love to read, if you have a way to send that to me, I would love to reread it again. And my only comment is I grew up from the age of 1 in a American Baptist church, which was a very open, accepting, eclectic form of Baptist, which was, thank you God, very accepting of people of all races, creeds, backgrounds, etc.
Wait,
So I loved I was a singer, so I was very thinking that this was a cool thing to do, to be a part of a church. And when I was about 16, 17, I started having some problem with the language and the messages. And I wasn't, whatever spiritual strength I came up with was not willing to be put in a box ever. My mother used to call me the free spirit. She always called me that since I was little, because I would argue with the ministers and the priests and the rabbis, not argue, but I would question and then want to know what in the world is this supposed to mean. So that said, I decided somehow this voice in my head said, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. But there was a whole lot of bathwater. So I remember thinking my mission is to keep the baby and then just keep moving forward. Because I had no compass, no map, nothing. You're teaching, you're such a good teacher. I just want to honor you for a second. And so was Jesus, a really good teacher. And I of myself want to be an instrument of peace in any way I can be. And I'm working on becoming a better teacher. That's why I'm glued to these radio shows with you and Tim and, paying attention to good teachers that are on the planet right now in all kinds of ways. And I'm coming to the intensive with this mission in my heart and soul that I want to keep moving forward, surrounding myself with people who have found something more true and more resonant in my heart and soul so that I can be reinforced and be clear about how how I can go forth and do goodness in the world. And so thank you for all that. I didn't know I was going to say any of that, but it really inspired me to say that. And I've been pondering how I wanted to even speak one word about this latest school shooting, because so much got stirred up, but it wasn't sensible and it wasn't, I needed time to really sit with it. So your reading that helped me land a lot of things. And I just, long-winded way of saying thank you. And I'll be quiet now.
well, honored and delighted. Thank you for saying thank you. I hope it serves and will continue to serve. And probably sometime before the day's out or early tomorrow, Jeanie will have the video on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to go back and give a listen to it.
Thank you,
whenever
Jeanie.
you like.
Thank you,
Yes, thank you,
Jeanie.
Jeanie. The technology, the whole thing is just so amazing what Jeanie does, and nobody knows what it takes to take, one of these recordings and convert it, and then convert it, and then convert it, and then run it through a translator, and then get keywords and all that stuff she does with every show, with every one of the CoDependence sessions, and it's huge. So accolades
Amazing.
and thank you to Jeanie. Yes.
Love it to both of you.
All right. Blessings.
You
And
too.
Mr. Dusty, how are you, sir?
Well, I am doing well today. Thank you for asking. And yes, I was following that, and it somewhat paraphrases something that somebody sent me on Facebook. And to reduce things to their simplest form, in a sense, the problem is in the human world that I can see is the us and them. And people wiser than me from ancient times to present have said that the only problem really is people think they're separate from God. And if you think you're separate from God, then you might think you're separate from other people that aren't just like you. And so whether it's World War I and Serbia and Prussia, with the smallest of differences, really, the us and them thing, gotta throw that away, kids. We're all made of love, right?
Definitely time.
Yeah, we're all made of love, and so do not hate. If you join, you can be angry, upset, or whatever you want to do. But if you hate, you add to the darkness that's going on. So don't hate. Do what this show talks about all the time. We're made of love. Just be the love you are, and do not cause separation or believe in separation, the us and them thing. And that's kind of all I've got. It's relative to what was said from your reading.
Well, definitely joining you in that, and appreciate you holding the space for it.
Yes. And and before I go, I just want to emphasize that it's so simple, but yet seems to be so hard, the thing to just not be a hater. Just don't join the fray. So anyways, You got it. And so God bless everybody, and love.
All you need is love. Do. We could write a song about that, Jesse.
Oh yeah, I think I've got some lyrics in my head we could maybe write on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and when we're told not to do something, if one doesn't have the tool with which to dig that something that's inside of the mountain, throw it away, it's pretty tough not to do it. And to me, that's one of the major things that really brought me out of the business world into doing this work was if we got to get the tools, we got to make it available. If somebody doesn't have a way to remove the hate that's maybe been going on in their bloodline for generations, if they don't have the tool, how are they going to do it?
Right.
Because if it's in them, through resonance, they're going to draw somebody to bring it up. And when it comes up, they're going to do one of two things. It's either going to take them over and they're going to blast somebody with it, or they're going to go, oh, look what's inside of me. I have forgiveness. I know how to get rid of that. So I'm with you, Dusty, 100%.
Okay, brother. Okay.
All right. You have a blessed one.
You too. Ta-ta for now.
All right. Miss Susan B.
I don't even know if I should say this, because what you're doing is you dug way down underneath all the motivations that a shooter might have had to shoot, and the preacher, what he said and did, which might have inspired someone to want to shoot. That preacher sounds like a powerful, wonderful, wide, um, uh, big personality, brave, trying to do God's work. And you were good. You kept saying, this is the Greek when you were reading. This is the Greek, not what Aramaic would say. I'm just, and I might have missed something, but that shooter was hurt. He thought someone really was critical of him and what he was or who he was. And I don't even know the details, but he couldn't stay with hurt. So he got mad and who knows what else. He picked up the rifle and dealt with it in a primitive way. Of course, the tools would have been great. Our whole culture seems to be a very bad one for white young men right now. I just wanted process or something, due process, acknowledgement of the pain that would cause a person to do such a thing. Of course, it boils
Right.
down to exactly what you were saying. I wanted to put in a word for what was that on both sides that made it so sick that this had to happen.
Well, you know, the bottom over, it's interesting, over 300 times in the scriptures, some say that it's actually literally 365 times, one for each day. That book they call the Bible says, in one way, shape, or form or another, fear not.
Mm,
And there are people standing out on the street corners with that book in their hands saying, fear of God is the beginning of wisdom.
right.
Like, we got to start somewhere. And until that's dealt with, what do we have but mass insanity? Time for healing.
Yeah, I could tell. I'm not thinking you weren't. I certainly don't think this man is a saint, though. I
Say it
mean,
again.
I don't think Charlie Kirk was a saint. Not that I'm a picker of saints, but because he was using mistranslations, he couldn't teach what Jesus meant. And so harm was in the air from the beginning.
It's been going on for a long time.
Mm.
Any other thoughts?
No, thanks. I just wanted to say that. Not even sure it was clear what I said, but tried.
I got it,
Oh,
I think.
good. Yeah, you probably did.
And, we're here to join each and every one in getting as clear as possible on the use of the tools and then supporting actually using them. So that's what we be here about. So breathing with everyone, holding the space for this massive fear and rage and pain that's moving through the culture right now, that we individually and collectively become more powerfully a space of active love to create its dissolution and the return to love that each and every one of us is.